She didn't mean to wound him that deeply. It was supposed to be a joke, a playful jab tossed across a polished wooden bar under golden lights. But the moment the words left her lips, "Ooh, single dad like you can't please a woman," something shifted in the air between them. His jaw tightened, not with anger, but with something quieter, something wounded. Then he leaned in slightly, eyes steady and calm, and said, "I want to bet?" Before we go any further, if you believe in kindness and second chances and in the quiet strength of single parents who give everything for their children, take a moment to like this video. Comment where you're watching from, share it with someone who needs hope today, and subscribe to the channel. Stories like this deserve to be heard. The bar was warm and intimate, lined with framed black and white photographs and soft jazz humming through hidden speakers. Emma had chosen the place because it felt safe. She hadn't expected to meet someone like Daniel that night. She certainly hadn't expected to say something that would crack open a door neither of them knew they were standing in front of. Daniel wasn't flashy. No designer suit, no expensive watch glinting for attention. He wore a simple dark shirt, sleeves rolled to reveal strong forearms marked faintly with old scars that told stories he didn't volunteer. There was something grounded about him, something steady. The kind of steadiness that only comes from surviving storms you didn't ask for. Emma had noticed him because he didn't stare. In a room full of men who leaned too hard into confidence, Daniel listened more than he spoke. When he did speak, his voice was low and thoughtful, not trying to impress. They'd started talking about work first. Emma was a marketing executive who thrived on sharp strategy and tighter deadlines. Daniel said he ran a small construction company. She had expected arrogance. Instead, she found humility. It was only when she asked casually, "So what do you do when you're not building houses?" that his expression softened in a way that caught her off guard. He'd said simply, and his tone carried. Later, she learned his wife had died 3 years ago in a car accident on a rainy highway. One moment a normal Tuesday, the next moment a hospital hallway and a 6-year-old girl asking when mommy would wake up. Daniel had become everything overnight. Father, mother, comforter, cook, bedtime storyteller, nightmare chaser. Emma didn't know that part yet when she made her teasing comment. She had grown up believing that single dads were charming but emotionally unavailable, too focused on their kids to truly make space for a woman. She had dated one before who canceled dinner 3 times in a row because of a babysitter issues. To her, it felt like settling for second place. So when Daniel admitted that he hadn't dated much since his wife passed, she smirked and said lightly, "Single dad like you can't please a woman." It was meant to be playful, but Daniel had spent years swallowing comments like that. Years of women who saw his daughter as baggage. Years of polite smiles that faded when he mentioned Taya meetings and ballet recitals. Years of being told he was admirable, but complicated. He leaned in not to intimidate, but to be heard. "Wanna bet?" he said softly. There was no arrogance in it, no ego, just quiet certainty. Emma felt a flicker of heat rise to her cheeks. It wasn't flirtation that unsettled her. It was conviction. Their first real date happened a week later. Not at a bar, but at a small outdoor cafe on a Sunday afternoon. Daniel arrived 10 minutes late, apologizing because he had to finish braiding his daughter Lily's hair before dropping her at a friend's birthday party. Emma laughed, surprised by the image of this broad-shouldered man carefully weaving tiny strands. Throughout lunch, his phone buzzed twice. Both times he checked it briefly and smiled. "She just wants to make sure I'm not eating vegetables," he explained. "She thinks I only behave when she's watching." Emma found herself smiling in spite of her skepticism. There was something undeniably attractive about a man who spoke of his child not as an obligation, but as the center of his world. Still, doubts lingered. When Daniel walked her to her car, she studied him carefully. "You know this isn't going to be simple," she said. "I'm not great at sharing." He didn't flinch. "I'm not asking you to compete with my daughter," he replied. "I'm asking you to see that loving her doesn't mean I have less to give." That sentence followed Emma home that night. The weeks that followed were cautious. Daniel never rushed. Well, he didn't shower her with grand gestures. Instead, he showed up. He remembered how she took her coffee. He sent her pictures of sunsets when he was driving home from job sites because she once mentioned she rarely looked up from her phone long enough to see the sky. He asked about her presentations and listened without interrupting. But the real test came when he introduced her to Lily Bill. Emma had imagined an awkward child who would glare at her with suspicion. Instead, Lily was small and bright-eyed, with a missing front tooth and a pink backpack nearly bigger than her. She studied Emma seriously before asking if she liked pancakes shaped like animals. Emma blinked and said yes, not realizing that was the entry exam. That Saturday morning, Daniel stood at the stove flipping lopsided pancake giraffes while Lily instructed him on proper ear proportions. Emma watched from the kitchen table, something warm blooming in her chest. It was messy and loud and imperfect, and yet it felt real. Later, when Lily ran outside to chase bubbles in the yard, Emma turned to Daniel. "You make it look easy," she said quietly. "It's not," he admitted. There are nights I sit on the floor outside her room because she's crying for her mom. There are mornings I burn the toast because I was up finishing invoices at 2 a.m., but she deserves consistency. She deserves someone who stays." That word, stays, landed heavily. Emma began to see the cracks beneath his strength, the exhaustion he masked with humor, the guilt he carried whenever he took time for himself, the way he hesitated before holding her hand in public, as if afraid of crossing a line he hadn't fully defined. And she began to confront her own fears. Her career had always come first. She thrived in control, in predictability. Loving a single dad meant unpredictability. It meant canceled dinners when Lily had a fever. It meant sharing holidays. It meant stepping into a life already in motion, not starting from scratch. One evening after a long day at work, Emma found herself sitting alone in her apartment staring at her phone. Daniel had texted to cancel their plans because Lily's school project had fallen apart and needed rebuilding. Emma felt the old irritation rise, the familiar narrative that she would always be second, but instead of lashing out, she drove to his house. She found them at the dining table surrounded by cardboard glue and glitter. Lily looked on the verge of tears. Daniel looked overwhelmed. Without a word, Emma rolled up her sleeves and sat down. 3 hours later, they had constructed a slightly crooked but triumphant model volcano. When Lily hugged her tightly before bed, whispering, "Thank you," something inside Emma shifted permanently. It wasn't about being pleased anymore. It was about being present. Months passed, and the walls Emma had built over years began to soften. She started rearranging her schedule without resentment. She learned the rhythm of Daniel's life. The early mornings, the bedtime stories, the quiet moments after Lily slept when they would sit on the porch and talk about everything and nothing. One night, Daniel confessed his greatest fear. "I'm terrified of failing her," he said. "And I'm terrified of losing someone again. I don't know if I could survive that twice." Emma reached for his hand. She realized then that his earlier challenge, "Wanna bet?" had never been about ego. It had been about proving that a man who pours himself into fatherhood doesn't become less of a partner. He becomes deeper. If this story is touching something inside you, if you've ever judged someone too quickly or doubted the strength of a single parent, take a second right now to like the video and share your thoughts in the comments. And before we reach the end, I want you to comment the word stay if you believe love means standing by someone, even when it's complicated. The true turning point came unexpectedly. Lily fell ill one winter evening with a high fever that wouldn't break. Daniel's composure cracked as he rushed her to the emergency room. Emma met them there without being asked. She stayed through the long hours of waiting, through the doctor's reassurances that it was a severe flu but manageable. At 3 in the morning, as Lily slept in a hospital bed, Daniel broke down. Not loudly, not dramatically, just a quiet release of years of pressure. Emma held him, understanding that strength sometimes looks like finally allowing yourself to lean on someone. In that sterile hospital room, under harsh fluorescent lights, Emma understood the bet. Could a single dad please a woman? The question had been flawed from the start, because what Daniel offered wasn't surface charm or carefree spontaneity. He offered loyalty forged in loss, patience carved from grief, a heart stretched wider by responsibility. He offered a life that required courage. Spring arrived with softer air and brighter mornings. Lily recovered fully, her laughter echoing through the house again. One evening, Daniel and Emma stood in the backyard watching her ride her bike in wobbly circles. He slipped his hand into Emma's and said nothing. He didn't need to. Emma realized she had stopped counting what she might lose and started cherishing what she had gained. She wasn't competing with a child. She was joining a team. The night he proposed wasn't elaborate. It happened in the kitchen, flour dusting the counters as Lily supervised another pancake experiment. Daniel knelt awkwardly between spilled batter and giggles, telling Emma that loving her had not taken away from his daughter. It had multiplied their joy. Tears blurred Emma's vision as she whispered, "Yes." And later, when the house was quiet and Lily asleep, Daniel leaned close again, the same steady look in his eyes as that first night at the bar. He didn't say, "I told you so." He didn't need to. Because the real victory wasn't about proving he could please a woman. It was about showing that a man who chooses to stay, who carries his responsibilities with pride, who opens his heart despite loss, that man doesn't lack capacity for love. He embodies it. If this story moved you, if it reminded you that love often comes wrapped in responsibility and courage, please like, comment, and share this video with someone who needs hope. Your engagement helps stories like this reach hearts that might be waiting for a reason to believe again. Sometimes the strongest men are the ones quietly packing lunches at dawn, and sometimes the greatest love stories begin with a challenge and a promise to stay. The first year of their marriage did not begin with fireworks. It began with routine. And that was the real miracle. Because real love, Emma was learning, did not live in dramatic declarations. It lived in alarm clocks set 15 minutes earlier so coffee could be poured before anyone asked. It lived in sticky notes tucked into lunch boxes. It lived in hands reaching for each other across a dark bed after a long day, not because everything was perfect, but because they had chosen each other again. If you're still here, it means this story has held you. And if you believe that love isn't about perfection but persistence, take a moment to like this video and subscribe. Stories about real commitment deserve to travel far. Marriage didn't magically erase Emma's old fears. Some nights when Daniel fell asleep quickly after exhausting days, she would lie awake wondering if she had fully stepped into a life that would always demand more than she had once imagined giving. There were still moments when Lily needed her father and Emma felt the faint sting of standing slightly outside their history. But instead of retreating, she leaned in. She attended parent-teacher conferences. She learned Lily's favorite bedtime story by heart. She sat through dance recitals where the music screeched and the choreography wobbled, clapping like it was Broadway. And slowly something shifted again. She wasn't stepping into someone else's life anymore. She was building one. Daniel noticed. He noticed how Emma braided Lily's hair with increasing confidence. He noticed how Lily began to run to Emma first when she scraped her knee. He noticed the way Emma's laughter had softened, less sharp, less guarded. One evening, months after their wedding, Emma found an old photo album tucked inside Daniel's closet. It held pictures of his late wife, smiling, vibrant, frozen in time. Emma sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the images, her heart tightening. Daniel found her there. For a moment, silence hovered between them. Not awkward, not hostile, just heavy. "I don't want to erase her," Emma said quietly. "But sometimes I don't know where I fit." Daniel sat beside her and took the album gently. "You don't replace someone who's gone," he said. "You add to what remains." Erase add to what remains. That night he told her stories, not in a way that compared, but in a way that honored. He spoke of grief as something that never fully disappears, only changes shape. And he made it clear that loving Emma did not diminish what he once had. It expanded what he was capable of now. Emma realized something profound in that moment. Loving a single parent means loving their history too, not competing with it, not resenting it, but respecting the layers that made them who they are. The true test of their bond came unexpectedly the following year. Daniel's construction business hit a rough patch when a major contract fell through. Bills piled up. The stress returned like an unwelcome ghost. He tried to shield Emma from it, but she saw it in the way he stared at spreadsheets late at night and the tension tightening his shoulders. Old Emma might have panicked. She had always equated stability with control, but this time she surprised even herself. She adjusted. She offered to contribute more financially without making it a wound to his pride. She brought home takeout less often and cooked more, or She reminded him that partnership meant weathering storms, not avoiding them. One night, when frustration finally spilled over, Daniel admitted he felt like he was failing again. Failing as a provider. Failing as a husband. Emma cupped his face and reminded him of something he had once said in a hospital room under fluorescent lights. Strength sometimes looks like allowing yourself to lean on someone. He did, and together they navigated the uncertainty. Within months, new contracts emerged, the business steadied. But what mattered more was what had been proven during the struggle. They were no longer two people testing a bet. They were a team forged by shared responsibility. Lily, now older and perceptive, began to understand more about the shape of love in their home. One afternoon, as Emma helped her with homework, Lily looked up and asked, "Do you think Mommy would like you?" The question could have shattered something fragile. Instead, Emma swallowed her fear and answered honestly, "I hope she would be happy that you're loved." Lily considered this carefully, then nodded. "I think she would." That small exchange healed a space Emma hadn't realized still ached. Years passed, measured not by grand milestones, but by ordinary miracles. First lost tooth under Emma's careful watch, science fair ribbons pinned to kitchen corkboards, late-night talks about friendships and heartbreaks. Emma and Daniel learned that intimacy deepens not in dramatic gestures but in shared exhaustion and shared triumphs. On their 5th anniversary, Daniel took Emma back to the same bar where everything had begun. The photographs still lined the walls. The lighting was still warm and forgiving. They sat at the counter, older now, softer around the edges, wiser in ways neither had anticipated. Emma remembered her careless tease. She remembered the quiet strength in his reply. She reached for his hand, first this time. "You won," she whispered. Daniel smiled gently. It was never about winning, and she understood fully now. The bet had not been about proving a single dad could please a woman. It had been about challenging the assumption that love shrinks when divided. In truth, it multiplies. As they left the bar that night, Emma realized how drastically her definition of fulfillment had changed. Success no longer meant promotions alone or flawless plans. It meant coming home to shared laughter. It meant Sunday mornings with pancake disasters. It meant a child calling her from upstairs simply to say goodnight again. Before we close this chapter, I want to ask you something from the heart. If this story reminded you that love is built through patience, sacrifice, and courage, please take a moment to like this video, comment your thoughts, and share it with someone who believes they're too complicated to be loved. Your engagement keeps stories like this alive. And just before you go, comment the word courage if you believe that choosing to stay is one of the bravest acts of all. Because here's the truth Emma learned. The most powerful love stories don't begin with perfection. They begin with vulnerability, with someone daring to say, "Wanna bet?" Not as a challenge, but as an invitation. An invitation to see beyond assumptions, an invitation to grow beyond fear. An invitation to build something steady in a world that often feels fragile. Years later, when Lily prepared to leave for college, she hugged both of them tightly at the door. She thanked her father for never giving up. She thanked Emma for choosing to join their lives instead of walking away when it seemed complicated. As the car drove off, Emma slipped her hand into Daniel's once more. The house felt quieter, but not empty. It was filled with echoes of years spent choosing each other again and again. Daniel looked at her with that same steady certainty he had all those years ago. And this time, Emma leaned in first. Love had not been about proving a point. It had been about proving a promise. Sometimes the strongest men are not the loudest. They are the ones who stay. And sometimes the bravest women are not the ones who demand to be first, but the ones who choose to stand beside a man who has already learned how to love deeply. The bet had been answered long ago, not with words, with a lifetime.